Hi, everybody. This is Richard Sachs. I'm your host on Lost Arts Radio. This is our show for worldwide broadcast on Sunday, the 14th day of January 2018. In another year. It seems like the last one went by in about a week to me, but I think everybody agrees it's speeding up. We've got kind of really neat opportunity for the show tonight, and I think that you'll all appreciate the opportunity to hear from a good friend of ours who has an interesting background. I'll tell you a little bit about what he's done. He's a Christian author, researcher, speaker, well-known worldwide for his leading-edge research focused on experimentation around the CERN project in Switzerland that we've heard a lot about on various shows, including Alex's, and we've talked a little bit about it here. But what you may not know is that he was a paramedic in Oakland, California for 27 years, and then got into a long research track, mostly focusing on quantum physics, quantum computing, AI, DNA modification, things like that, and wrote a book called Covert Catastrophe in 2013, and in 2014 by a book called 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, and another nonfiction book in 2016, Revising Reality. And he's been on all kinds of radio programs, and even with John B. Wells on Caravan to Midnight, he's got his own radio show. You might have heard of him. His name is Anthony Patch, and we've been thinking about having him on for a long time. Finally got an opportunity to do that, and want to have him tell us all about what he's done, his background up to this point and where he's going now. He's also the editor of a magazine called Entangled Magazine, and that's been around every month since June of last year, 2017. So this is going to be a really interesting discussion. We're going to get into a lot more than just CERN, because there's some areas of his particular investigation that I didn't really hear about until we're getting ready for this show. And I want a chance to get into them because I suspect you haven't heard about them much either. So anyway, thank you, Anthony, for the time and being here. And I'm really grateful for the chance to talk directly for a while. We'll get into some interesting discussion here.
Well, thank you, Richard. I'm honored to be with you and your audience for Lost Arts Radio. And it is an honor for me to speak to your audience. And I hope I will entertain as well as inform. And I'd love to go wherever you'd like to go with the discussion tonight.
All right. Well, here's where I'd like to start. Just because we've got always new listeners tuning in who might not be familiar with even the topic of CERN that's been talked about so much. I want to go back in time to before you were really focused on these things and talk about what you were doing before you really had an interest in this and how it led up to where you are now. And then we'll get into some of the current topics.
Okay. Well, that sounds great. My first foray into, let's say, nuclear science was when I was in the military in 1977 to 79 in West Germany, and I was working with nuclear warheads, which I came to find out many years later, because I'm adopted. I found out through my biological mother, who connected with me in my adult years, that my father actually worked at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, the national laboratory, working with nuclear warhead design and the prototypes. And so it was kind of an interesting circuit. My mother also, my biological mother, met my father at UC Berkeley, where I went to school. Many years later, she met him during the war and was part of the Manhattan Project, working with Dr. Lawrence and Dr. Teller and Dr. Oppenheimer directly. And she was not a physicist. She was working in the machine shop as a young woman. That's where she met my father, who was an engineer who went on to open the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory. So you might say it's kind of in my DNA.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it.
Yeah. So that was an interesting awakening. But my adopted father was a general practitioner, and he practiced in Berkeley. Many of his patients were physicists at UC Berkeley. And I had an interest in medicine because of my upbringing, and so I went on into, after my military years, I went on into the paramedic trade, if you will. Mm-hmm. He was just off of the UC campus itself. Many of his patients were physicists that worked at UC Berkeley, specifically at the RAD lab, what we call the lab up on the hill. When I was 10 years old, I was given a tour with my father of one of the particle accelerators up there, a Bevatron, which led later on to the synchrotron that is presently there. And we got a tour, and I actually walked across the magnets, the catwalk of this particle accelerator. So again, sort of getting the exposure and my military experience with warheads. I had heard in Germany, when I was in West Germany in the military, that about CERN, and that sparked my interest in CERN and then on into general physics itself and quantum computing and quantum mechanics, and then over into DNA research, which took me all the way back to Berkeley, which is where the human genome, through the synchrotron particle accelerator research, the human genome was actually mapped at Berkeley. So I came full circle, and it's in the DNA, I think, pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. So somehow that led you to where you got interested in getting into the paramedic work. How did that happen?
Yeah, my father, who's a general practitioner, through I would say environmental exposure, I had an interest in medicine, and so when I left the military in 1980, I went to paramedic school and spent 27 years in Oakland, and my last 6 years teaching. And then once I retired, I found that CERN was something that still captivated me. And it wasn't long after that that I discovered the nefarious side to what was going on there, specifically the statue of Shiva. And this was along about, I'd say probably 2011 when it was erected there.
Okay.
So that's kind of long and short of it.
How did you even hear about CERN? Because most people in the world still don't know it exists.
Yeah, when I was working with nuclear warheads in West Germany, part of my training led to the understanding of the work that was going on basically over the hill, if you will, in Geneva, Switzerland. And the facility itself, most of it is 300 feet below grade. That's where the main ring, which is 27 kilometers in circumference, is located, and the 4 detectors, which is where the collisions occur. And so there isn't much to see other than the administrative buildings and some of the maintenance facilities that are above ground.
Okay. So, you tell me exactly what brought, how did this come up, even that you ever heard about it? I mean, do you remember the first conversation or who it was that was talking about it that you heard when you didn't know about it?
Yes. Part of my training was to understand the testing and calibration of the warheads that we had in West Germany. This was part of the Lance missile system, and that the artillery units would ostensibly, they had prepared to fire towards the incoming Russian forces should that ever come about. And we were basically on the front lines, and we were considered expendable. The warrant officers were the ones that were responsible for testing and calibration, and they were the ones that were instructing me about the warheads. And also that led to them explaining about CERN and the research that was going on there, because CERN, in its early years, it was actually founded in 1953, the same year I was born. Okay. It was founded for the purpose of modeling the nuclear yield of warheads in a computer, because where we were advancing throughout the world, but specifically in the U.S., was towards the nuclear test ban treaties for below grade and above grade atmospheric testing. So they needed to maintain the stockpile and also the advanced research, the continuing research, by modeling the prospective yield of devices in the computer. And that's primarily the reason that CERN was even built.
So this sounds like kind of a virtual atomic bomb test.
That's exactly what it was and continues to this day.
Wow, how interesting. I never heard of that before. So when you heard about CERN, it was essentially a mechanism to do that, as far as you knew at that time, right?
That's correct. And then when I left the military, and as more of a hobby than anything else, I continued with my paying attention to and keeping tabs on what CERN was doing, because I was fascinated with the technology, the machinery, and the advancements that they were making. And I wasn't so much interested in the nuclear yield aspect of it as it was the quantum mechanics that they were advancing in and the discovery of new particles.
How did you even hear that they were doing that?
Oh, it was very easy. Popular Science and Popular Mechanics covered it extensively during the 80s and 90s.
Okay. And so what does that really mean? Looking for some kind of new particle, or what did they say it was for?
Well, it's only been in recent years that they really have come out and said that they were looking for new particles. What they were trying to put forth in the 80s and 90s was what they still talk about, and that is modeling, the Big Bang, trying to prove the Big Bang theory.
Wow, okay. So they're trying to come up with proof for how they think the whole universe started.
That's correct, and that included their discussions of such things as dark matter and dark energy, both of which have neither been proven, and of course neither been experimentally reproduced in the laboratory. It's never been measured, never been proven, and never tested.
Right.
But they can continue to promote it.
That's kind of a pattern in science through history, is to be absolutely sure something's true and then find out it's completely not true and start over again.
That's true. And specifically on dark matter, dark energy, this is what I've considered to be the Einstein model, which is the gravitational model of the universe, versus what I would consider Tesla's model, which is the electric model of the universe. And I would encourage people to go to a website known as the Thunderbolts Project. I'm not a spokesperson, but I love their research, and these are legitimate scientists that are doing the research, and they are presenting the electric model of the universe as Tesla did, specifically in lieu of dark energy, dark matter. We're talking about Tesla's ether, which is defined in more current terms as ionized gas or plasma, the fourth state of matter, in that what we would call the void of space is actually filled with this ionized gas, this plasma, and it is an electrically conductive medium. And one quick example is NASA has taken pictures with the Hubble of light-year in length strands of electrical current that are known as Birkeland currents. Mm-hmm. And they look just like a twisted pair of DNA helical strands. And they're oppositely charged particles that are conducted through the plasma of the universe. And yet mainstream science will not acknowledge this, will not acknowledge the electric model, which I call Tesla's model.
So is the existence of these Birkeland currents, being these electrical strands up there, is that supposed to be connected with the ability of communication to happen virtually instantaneously between faraway spots, making the speed of light no longer the recognized maximum velocity that you can travel at?
Not really, not specifically. I think what you're referring to are what are known, and that's the name of my magazine, is entangled, but quantum entangled particles, which Einstein described as spooky action at a distance. And these are two particles that can be separated by any distance, even light years. Mm-hmm. And they can be different particles from one another. But these are quantum particles. They're subatomic in size. And one will have what is known as upspin, and the other will have downspin. If you affect one particle, let's say take the downspin and make it an upspin, instantaneously with no time involvement, the other particle will also switch its spin. And the way I like to describe it is, imagine two pieces of matter connected by a metal rod. If I push on that rod in one direction, it will immediately affect the other end of the rod where the other particle of matter is connected. So time is not involved in quantum entanglement. And yes, it is a form of communication and is actually being applied here on the Earth experimentally and has been tested and proven specifically for encrypted communications, quantum entanglement communications using quantum computers.
So the thing is, those metal, what you would imagine as the metal rods, they're all over the place, but they're not visible.
Mm-hmm.
But it means that, does that mean, could you extrapolate that to mean that any two particles anywhere are connected somehow?
Yes. If we were to sort of borrow from the New Age perspective, and I'm not New Age, as you introduced me, I am a Christian, but they oftentimes will say that we're all connected. Everything in the universe is connected. Well, they're not wrong.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing, right?
This is God's design.
Yeah.
And if I can sidestep just a little bit,
sure.
When we oftentimes hear things that come out in a new age vernacular, or we hear things that are representing God's structure, but it's being represented by what I would consider a Luciferian group. All they're really doing is counterfeiting God's grand design. They're counterfeiting what God has already created. And as we know, there's nothing new under the sun. Look at Ecclesiastes. So really what we're talking about here is the counterfeiting of everything and then shifting it into some other form of belief or pagan worship or whatever you want to call it. But I do laugh about that. But yes, literally everything is quantum entangled, and science is beginning to acknowledge that everything in the universe is quantum entangled.
So entangled could be translated in more simple terms as connected, right?
Absolutely. It's all connected.
Entangled kind of has a connotation of being like tangled up in some way. But you just mean they affect each other and they're connected, right?
Yes, they do. And you and I spent some time earlier today kind of getting to know each other, and I appreciate that time that you set aside for that. And we are in agreement as to this ability for what I consider our quantum computer, which is between our ears. And we can define that in a bit if you like. But our quantum computers actually do affect our environment, our surroundings, our universe, and we can actually use our minds. And this is not New Age. This is in Scripture. We can use our minds to actually change things. And as it says in Scripture, if we had but a bit of, and give me the proper language here, if we had just a bit of faith, if we had
like the mustard seed deal, right?
The mustard seed. Yes, I was thinking kernel, sorry. But the mustard seed, we could move mountains. That is quite literal.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that's an allegory, so to speak.
No, not at all. In fact, you and I were talking, as I said, and I want to quote this piece of scripture from John 14, verse 12 through 14. Verily, verily, I say unto you, and this is Jesus speaking to his disciples prior to his crucifixion. I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works that I do, shall he do also. And greater works than these shall he do, because I go unto my Father. And there's a little more, but that's astounding.
If you really pay attention to that, you're right. It is. And I think it's really significant for what's going to happen with the world from this point on in history, whether it's going up or down. But before we get too far into that, I wanted to just ask you a question that I meant to ask. If I understand what you said about Tesla's electric model of the universe, this is basically the idea that everything is connected and affecting everything else by these subtle electrical currents. Is that right?
You hit it right on the head, my friend.
Okay. And then you said there were two basic models, and that was the electric one was contrasted with, I think you called it the gravitational model that Einstein was associated with. Is that right?
That is correct. And mainstream science today still adheres to the gravity model. Gravity, in comparison to the electric model, and specifically electromagnetism, Electromagnetism is 10 to the 39th power in greater power, greater strength, 10 to the 39th power stronger than gravity. So how do you account for gravity being responsible for things like maintaining the orbits of the planets?
Okay, right. Wow. So, yeah, when you say the model of the universe, that means things like how the orbits stay the way they are and how all the galaxies remain moving in relation to each other in harmony and that sort of thing. And the Einstein model, or the model that current science is adhering to, says that this is all because of a force that I guess they don't know actually even what it is, but they call it gravity, and that's the reason that all this stuff is staying in balance.
Yeah, they'll put forth a discussion of a theoretical particle that accounts for gravity called the graviton. And they've also had some detectors of late that have claimed to detect gravitational waves. Now, if it is so difficult to detect gravitational waves, in which you have to have a detector that is about 3/4 the length of the United States and underground, and these gravity waves occur so weakly and in such rarity of occurrence that it's only been in the last couple of years and confirmed, according to mainstream science, this last year in 2017, that gravity waves actually exist. And yet, if you simply take a magnet and pick up a piece of metal, iron metal off the ground, you can prove electromagnetism. You can prove it by turning on a light switch. You can prove it in mythology. According to the golden age of Kronos being Saturn, the golden age that even the New Agers have put forth, but the Thunderbolts Project has demonstrated archaeological evidence, cave drawings, other forms of written records, Sumerian records being one, of the movement of Saturn, the Earth, and Mars together through the universe, and then being electromagnetically trapped by the sun, not gravitationally, and brought into this solar system. And then in those early days, there was an electrical conduit, as I call it, Birkeland currents, that connected Saturn to the Earth, to Mars, all the way down in what we would consider in the biblical record as Jacob's ladder. Jacob's ladder were electrical charged particles in a twisted helix, again looking like DNA, that were observed and recorded in ancient history here on this planet. And the record survives to this day of these connections. And then eventually the planet shifted in their orbits, but it's definitively been shown not only in that ancient record. Velikovsky comes to mind, planets in collision, worlds in collision. You have also in the modern time the observance by NASA, by cosmologists, of comets entering into the solar system. And it's been shown definitively that the ejecta, the material coming off the comets, is electrically charged. And because it has an opposite charge to a nearby planet or a nearby moon or even the sun, there is an electrical discharge, just like a welder's arc, that takes place between the comet and that planetary body that has an opposite charge. So they're showing evidence of the electrical structure and the electromagnetism that accounts for the movements of heavenly bodies, including the orbits of our own planets. And yet this is being, as I call it, obfuscated by mainstream science. So the question comes up, it arises, why cover it up? Why not acknowledge the electric model? Well, for the same reasons that they didn't acknowledge Tesla and they suppressed his technology. Because the technologies of Tesla are being used at places like CERN, but they need to be kept under wraps, because if they were to allow you and me as the average person to really know the technologies that are being employed in the darkest reaches of mainstream science. Technologies that are as much as 50 years in advance that we don't even know about because we only see the tip of the iceberg that they release. They don't want to acknowledge that these advanced technologies are all based on electromagnetism.
Right.
That was a long one.
No, that's interesting. I'm just absorbing it. So there have been some people going around the country and other parts of the world recently giving talks about something they call the electric universe. Mm-hmm. Is this related to what you've just described?
Yes, that's coming from the Thunderbolts Project. Absolutely.
Okay. Interesting.
The electric universe is the real model of the universe.
So, apparently the higher level government and corporate rulers agree with that. As I told you when we talked before, I really have great respect and trust for the government and for the corporations because they're giving you a lot of interesting information and guidance if you remember to translate by reversing it, as apparently you've talked about on your show as well. And they're, by trying to cover up the electrical model of the universe, they're letting you know that that's really the best understanding they've got, that that's how it works.
Well, the folks that are spreading the word, so to speak, that are, we'll call them apostles, if you will, of the electric model, the electromagnetism being the true mechanism of the universe, those are the people we can trust. The folks that are putting out the gobbledygook, if you will, about gravity accounting for everything, mm-hmm. and even such things as the Higgs boson, really are putting out I'm just going to come right out, they're lying to us.
Well, right, that's why I'm saying that they can be trusted to be telling you that the opposite is true.
Ah, okay, so we're doing what I call the 180 process.
Yeah, that's what I mean, right.
Okay, all right, I'm up with you now.
Yeah, you get all kinds of wonderful health advice from government and top-level corporations that way, too, as long as you translate. But
right, I was confused when you said there were people that were talking about electric model, because they are telling you the truth when they speak of that.
But that's why they can't be inside the power structure and do that.
Correct.
So that would be very confusing. If government wanted to really mess us up, they could start telling the truth a lot. It would make a big problem. But
yes, indeed.
So when you started investigating all this stuff, what was your main interest in the CERN project? Why did you really focus on that?
Well, it is incredible. You look at CERN and just the scale of it. For example, the detectors themselves, which are, as I said, 300 feet below grade, mm-hmm. They stand 3 stories tall, and they're multiple tons in weight and hugely complex, with thousands of detectors inside the detector structure itself. These are much like cameras, if you will. Okay. And it's just the sheer complexity. This is the largest experiment machine, if you will, in recorded history. It's certainly the most expensive. And at any given time, there are 10,000 scientists dedicated to running experiments and engineering programs at CERN. This is the largest project that mankind has ever undertaken in recorded history that we know of. Mm. It's the replication in modern times of the Tower of Babel.
Now, how does it? Okay, how exactly is it connected to the? Well, I know that the Tower of Babel is described as a really big project, so in that way I can see.
Sure.
But as far as, I guess what they were trying to do with the Tower of Babel, that is in the story that we've read, is they were trying to unify everybody's languages and understanding so that they could all communicate smoothly and accomplish certain things that they apparently weren't supposed to accomplish. But as far as the specific purposes, how do the two relate to each other?
Well, if we go back to Nimrod, who was basically a demigod, and Osiris, mm-hmm. and we look at the recorded mythology and the mythos, And we understand that this is a pagan organization, that their worship of Lucifer, the hubris, as I call it, of Lucifer and his minions, is such that Lucifer actually believes he can kill God. And
Right.
his minions, represented by Nimrod, thought that if they built a tower that was tall enough, they could reach into the heavens and they could actually go to war in the heavens with God's angels and with God himself and kill God. And again, in the hubris of Lucifer, to ascend to the throne. And again, this is reflected in Scripture. And this was the real purpose of building the tower to heaven.
Yeah, so it makes the insanity of the current age not seem that unique, except maybe in style.
I would agree with you. And many people have heard that CERN has put out, and this was going back now about 5 years ago, the head of computing and engineering at CERN at the time was Sergio Bertolini. And he made the statement, and it's been reproduced throughout the internet, that they seek to open a doorway to another dimension, and they will send through a message, but they're not sure what will come back through the doorway. And even Dr. Stephen Hawking, the eminent cosmologist and physicist and mathematician, has said, you may not want to open that doorway.
Yeah,
Okay.
What did they say, like in Ghostbusters, important safety note or something like that?
Yeah, Bill Murray.
Yeah. There was another experiment that we've heard about before CERN where, I forget, maybe you know about it, that what they were doing exactly, but they said, well, we're not sure if it'll really work. It might blow up the atmosphere of the Earth, but we have to try it.
Well, that goes back to the first at Trinity, the first atomic bomb test, in which Dr. Oppenheimer and other physicists, they were concerned that they might ignite the entire atmosphere with this nuclear detonation.
Yeah.
But they went ahead and did it anyway.
Yeah, you just have to know once you get curious about something like that, I guess.
Yeah, and his famous statement that's been oftentimes quoted, Dr. Oppenheimer, because he was a Buddhist. He said that he quoted the Bhagavad Gita saying, "I have become death. Now I have become death." And he was essentially talking, really, he was making a reference to what we see now, which is the statue of Shiva, which is the god of destruction.
Destroyer, yeah. But if he was going to be a good Buddhist, wasn't he supposed to be peaceful and not do stuff like that?
Well, I would hope so, but there's also this idea of taming the elements, that you can achieve this communication through the elements. And they actually looked at nuclear detonations as a way to communicate with the other side, to actually bring the other side through a doorway through those detonations. And that essentially is what CERN is trying to do with their collisions, is to generate, as I've estimated, about 20 peta-electron volts is what they need. They're at the tera-electron volts range now, 13.5 tera-electron volts, but they need about 20 peta-electron volts to actually open a dimensional doorway, to open a portal. And let's go back to the archaeological record. The location of one of the detectors, and again, appreciate that this is 27 kilometers in circumference. One of the detectors is actually located at the site of an ancient Roman temple to the god Apollo, Apollyon, Abaddon, the destroyer. Now, this has been often cited by many people. It's well known, but it's purposeful, the location of this collider being over what they consider and they acknowledge as the doorway to the abyss. And in Revelation 9, when the angel is cast from heaven and given the key to the bottomless pit, the key to the abyss, they open it, and they are successful.
So they're really into the destruction thing. I mean, it's not a coincidence that they didn't put a statue of Brahma or Vishnu out there. They chose Shiva.
Yeah, because Shiva actually has three phases, if you will. There's destruction, which is what everybody focuses on, but then there's this level playing field, as I call it, in which the universe is now at zero entropy. There's no energy. It's a wasteland. And then there's a rebirth. There's a renewing of the universe.
Well, right. It's cyclical, right?
It is. They believe that they can achieve a higher level of living or existence, a higher plane of existence, but only through destroying the present reality and bringing in a new reality by opening this doorway, which also involves quantum computers, and we can talk about that part of it. Opening this doorway to another environment, another reality that they want to bring into this reality.
And they figure that they'll survive the process without a problem, so it should be okay.
Well, yes, I guess so. But, it can be really a tricky thing. Hubris, and it comes from the Greek. I call it being full of yourself. Mm-hmm. It's self-deception, and it is thinking yourself so highly and so capable and so intelligent that you can achieve immortality no matter what your methodology is that you employ. And this goes back to, and we talked about this earlier today, the original promise, the lie, the deception in the Garden of Eden by Satan, in that ye shall be as gods.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that you have these super intelligent people seeming to lack any sign of intelligence in some really important areas?
Well, I guess you could call that common sense, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think that's what they're missing, right?
Yeah.
And they're also missing, they seem to be completely missing something called empathy, which means they don't mind who they hurt or kill as long as they get some arbitrary goal accomplished.
I think that is very true. And it is also this priesthood mentality, this elitism, that they are so intelligent and so schooled that it really doesn't matter what happens to the rest of humanity, because they feel that they are seeking and will achieve a higher form of life, human 2.0, if you will.
It's another version of the greater good idea. And sometimes I think that the idea is not only that they're so amazingly brilliant, but just the fact that they're above everybody else is like a drug in itself, a kind of a power trip that they get drunk on.
Definitely. It feeds the egos. And again, that's one of the, the big weaknesses in humankind is our ego. And something we'll talk about later on is greed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty interesting stuff. So in the beginning, when you first really found out what you did about the activities at CERN, your interest was focused where, and then how did it change over time?
Well, the focus was, as I said, on the mechanisms, the quantum mechanics that was going on, and their goals of discovering new particles and new energy sources. And hopefully, this is what attracted me, was that they would actually achieve what Tesla was seeking, and that was free energy, unlimited energy, the tapping into the ether. And that's what it appeared that they were seeking, was that unlimited energy. But when the statue of Shiva was erected at CERN, and I don't want to sound like I'm a prophet or anybody special, but I really questioned it. And so I did a little bit of research. What is this statue? What does it represent? As I've just quickly described.
In other words, you thought it wasn't a coincidence they didn't just get a good deal on a random statue at Walmart that week or something.
No. And it wasn't presented by the Indian government for the purpose of acknowledging their researchers that were working there. Because my question then is, why did they not erect the crucifix and other religious artifacts and symbols at CERN? Why only
Why did
Shiva?
they choose that particular one, in other words?
That's right, exactly.
Yeah, it's a good question, right.
And that led me back to Oppenheimer, as we just talked about. And I had read quite a few books about the origins of the work that was done at Berkeley and then Lawrence Livermore. And I read a great deal about Oppenheimer, and it really began to bother me. And I realized especially when Sergio Bertolini said they wanted to open a doorway.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, this is not right. And I took it to prayer. I took it to prayer with the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And I had not even thought about writing a book. And I had this, let's call it an inspired moment, in which he impressed upon me, you've done enough research. You need to start writing about this. I had no intention of writing or broadcasting or any of the things I'm doing now. And that began in November of 2011, when I started writing my first book. And it was for the purpose of shedding light on the game is rigged. Science is rigged. If you look at the origins of science, it goes back not just to alchemy, but it goes all the way back into things like necromancy and geomancy, which is divining random marks in the soil.
Mm-hmm.
This whole thing is about communicating with the other side. So no wonder they want to open a doorway, because they, not just at CERN, I mean, we'll branch out on this discussion, but they are openly communicating already with the other side. And I have definitively laid the foundation since June in my Entangled magazine at anthonypatch.com. I have laid the foundation for the origins of all modern science, as basically, to sum it up, as being alchemy. This is the dark arts. Technology is the science of the craft. Nothing has changed.
Isn't it interesting that they have to do all this technology slanted toward anything that will damage or kill you? I mean, even this is just everywhere. They have to come up with new forms of agriculture producing plants that'll give you diseases, and technology, wireless technology and cell phone radiation and things that will give you cancer and it doesn't have to be done that way. I think they could have as advanced technology as they want and have it be human friendly if that weren't the intent.
Agreed. And so let's take a touch point, as I often say. Let's go back to the work of the Nazis in World War II. Most people are familiar with the fact that they were openly a cult, and occult simply means to obfuscate. It means to cover up, but the occult worship, if you want to call it. And their technology was derived by communicating with the other side, specifically with the fallen angels. They obtained information that was denied to mankind, that was considered to be information that God did not want us to have. Okay, that's as plain as I can make it. The technologies we see today are obtained in exactly the same ways that the Nazis employed, that people like John Dee and Edward Kelly in the late 1500s, using geomancy and necromancy, obtained information from the other side that resulted in a lot of the science of that day that has led into today. I've done a lot of research into the origins of science, and just to sum it up very quickly, all of it is from the dark side. This is forbidden knowledge. And
what they call science today, in other words.
What they call science today. Because, yes, you could employ these technologies in a very positive way, in a very beneficial way. And we know that because we have things like the MRI for brain scans, body scans. There's a host of things that can be done. But we see that technology all through history is always employed first for warfare. It's for weapons development. Okay.
Well, and even in the medical industry, the MRI is useful, but it gives you a huge dose of radiation while it's giving you the information.
That is correct.
And they're using it on cancer patients, to say, well, we're really going to monitor what's going on with your cancer. And just in case, you're not getting it bad enough, we're going to cause a lot more of it. And I just think you could have technology that doesn't have those kind of side effects.
That's true. That's true. And there is definitely the holistic side of this discussion that we could have. The malevolence that is involved here is profound. What I have been doing for the last, 5-6 years is showing, not only revealing what has been occulted, but showing what I call the evidence of evil. When you look at virtually any area of modern technology, all of it has its origins in the occult. It all has its origins in the dark arts of alchemy and moving forward. And I can be very specific. I'm going to leap forward to another topic, and that's quantum computers.
Okay.
Quantum computers at this time, by the statement, and I've reproduced verbatim a statement made by one of the founders of D-Wave Corporation, which is the leading manufacturer of quantum computers at this time.
Yeah, it was started by the guy who made the first one, actually, right? He went to British Columbia or somewhere and was working for the government.
Right. Eric Ladozinski was the scientist, and Gordy Rose, who is also a physicist, well, by training, he has his PhD in physics. He is more of an entrepreneur and venture capitalist. He brought $20 million to the table to Eric Ladozinski, and they founded D-Wave Corporation. Now, D-Wave, its roots come from DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research programs. And DARPA, our tax dollars, were given to D-Wave and to Eric Ladozinski specifically to the tune of $10 million.
Yeah, he was. If I remember right, he was really happy that his new quantum computing technology was going to go into the best hands where it could go to really help the world. That's why he gave it to the government. Because I tried to talk to him right after his discovery came out, and he had already been completely purchased and put away.
Very interesting. We should talk about that off the air a little bit.
Yeah.
But to cite Gordy Rose, 2013, a video that he put out in which he makes one of the hugely impactful statements was they were accessing with their then 512 model, which is 512 qubits. Qubits are quantum bits. They're not transistors. The 512 model was accessing 2 to the 500th power. 2 to the 500th power of parallel dimensions. And that if we are smart enough, if we're clever enough, we'll be able to access those dimensions and extract resources from those dimensions. So what he's talking about is opening portals to other dimensions, communicating interdimensionally, and bringing back information into this reality to revise it. That's why I wrote Revising Reality.
These guys are not too smart, are they?
Well, they're smart in a negative way.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a 5-year-old being really happy that he figured out how to climb into a fighter jet and turn it on.
That's a pretty good way of putting it. Yeah, this is purely malevolent. Now, yesterday on the Kev Baker Show, I co-host with Kev Baker on Truth Frequency Radio on Monday and Wednesday, and then he joins me for my show on Fridays. Yesterday. So
just since you just mentioned that, how exactly do people tune into those two shows so they know where to go and where to look for them and stuff?
Sure. The shows themselves are posted on YouTube the following day on the Kev Baker channel or on the Anthony Patch channel. Okay. And the live broadcast is on Truth Frequency Radio, and you can find that. Just Google TFR or Truth Frequency Radio. It's also on iHeartRadio and many terrestrial radio stations.
Okay, great. So sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to make sure we got that out.
I appreciate that. That's helpful. But yesterday we really, and this is not the first time, we really presented the backstory of Gordy Rose, and we used his own website. And in sum total, it is all dark arts. It is all the worship of Lucifer. There is nothing in there that is Christian oriented. The entire thing is the occult on his own personal website, and he promotes the fact the fact that he is occultic in his origins.
Okay.
So when a guy like that talks about communicating with parallel dimensions, and now, by the way, the most recent model, they call it the 2000Q, that actually has 2048 qubits. They are now, by their own mathematics, accessing 2 to the 2000th power of parallel dimensions. So this is already reaching into and doing exactly what the alchemists did, like Dee and Kelly in the 1500s. This is what is referred to as Enochian mathematics, the Enochian language. This is all the same patented practice of communicating with fallen angels, with demons. And now they're out in the open about doing it with D-Wave.
Right, right. Yeah, and, it's a different picture than just being able to do a lot of math real fast.
That is true. And so I have published numerous articles. I've spent hundreds of hours on the radio talking about and laying out all of the evidence. And that's what I do. I try to be as much of just a factual reporter as I can be and lay out the evidence to back up what I'm saying to you just very succinctly today. And that is, this is a dark agenda. And there is also a direct correlation between D-Wave and CERN. And that comes right from CERN, and it comes right from D-Wave's own website. Their connection, their collaboration, their analyzing of the data that comes out of CERN by D-Wave, specifically related to the Higgs boson. These two organizations are interlocked because if you're going to open a quantum portal, a quantum doorway at the quantum scale, such as they have openly at CERN promoted that they're going to do this, that is their goal, to open a dimensional doorway.
Is that what they say publicly is their purpose?
Yes, absolutely. That's why I say Sergio Bertolini said that they are, from CERN, said they are going to open a dimensional doorway. He was the head of engineering and computing when he made that statement.
Did they tell the public why they want to do that?
Yes, because they want to access other realms to bring information into this realm that is of benefit to humanity.
Okay. It's the old benefit to humanity ploy.
Sure. If you talk about curing cancer, you can get away with anything.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe even stop global warming too.
Sure. So again, D-Wave openly stating that they're accessing parallel dimensions and bringing information into this reality. Their quantum computers employing exactly the same quantum mechanics as are employed at CERN without colliding. There's no colliding in the quantum computer. But if we have time, the mechanics of the quantum computer are identical to the mechanics on a larger scale at CERN. And therefore, the two are working together. They are supporting each other in the advancements of their technologies at each location.
When you say that the mechanics are the same, then somebody's going to picture a little mini CERN installation inside the D-Wave computer. I mean, how is it the same? How is it related?
Okay. We have the circulation of particles occurring by both devices. With the quantum computer, qubits are connected by electrons that are flowing in two different directions at the same time. You have electrons that are flowing counterclockwise while they're flowing clockwise, and this represents what is known as superposition, resulting in zeros being ones simultaneously to being a zero. If you take the one is simultaneously a zero while it remains a one. That is achieved through this contra-rotating flow of electrons, which by definition are quantum particles. Okay? They're a charged particle, negative charge. Now, and I'm being very simplistic here. There's a lot more that I've written about. Now, at CERN, in the main ring, which is circular, it's called a synchrotron particle accelerator, 27 kilometers in circumference. They are likewise circulating particles that they call beams, particles in opposite directions simultaneously. Now, the only difference between the two is CERN is colliding those streams of particles that are circulating, whereas D-Wave is not colliding particles. They don't need to do that. But absent any collisions at CERN, the collider itself, the main ring, is operating as a quantum computer on a very large scale. You might consider it to be a 1 qubit, a 1 quantum bit computer. Now, that's being very simplistic, but if you focus on the movement of quantum particles in opposite directions simultaneously, you now have superposition occurring within both machines, just on different scales.
You said CERN would be like a 1 quantum bit computer, though, right?
That is correct.
So what's a quantum bit?
It is a 0 and a 1. It is a binary pairing of 2 bits. And it is considered to be quantum because the bits are operating in a quantum state, a quantum environment where classical quantum mechanics do not apply. Only quantum mechanics apply. And that simply means, as one example, you can achieve superposition between particles where they can occupy the same state simultaneously. And that state is represented as a 0 or a 1. You can also achieve things called quantum entanglement that we talked about, and through quantum entanglement, you have what is called quantum tunneling through an energy state. And it is this tunneling process that actually accesses the parallel dimension.
Okay. And I know that words like quantum and plasma and things like that are thrown around, and a lot of people use them because nobody else understands what they mean, but usually that is including a lot of these guys that are putting their different dimensions on them. So that, what would you say is a correct understanding of what the word quantum means actually in this connotation?
It's a jump between energy states. So we're all familiar with the diagram of an atom, and we have these orbital pathways of particles that are orbiting the nucleus, right?
Yeah, we had Tinker Toy models in elementary school, I remember.
So if we take one particle, let's take the electron again, just for fun, because every atom has varying numbers of electrons.
Yeah, and they're circulating around like a solar system, basically, right?
Exactly. So in their orbital pathway, they have a given degree of energy, an amount. It's called a state of energy. So in that stable energy state, they're just kind of doing their thing. But if you impart an energy on that electron to a degree that it will suddenly change its state, in other words, it will move from one orbital pathway to another. Let's say it moves to a larger orbital pathway. So it goes from a small orbit to a large orbit. That gap between the two orbits, between the pathways, is called the quantum gap. When you apply more energy to that electron in the small orbit, it will build up energy to a degree to where it suddenly, not transitionally, but suddenly will jump. It will make what we've heard, the quantum leap from the small orbit to the large orbit.
Okay, yeah, because people are using the term quantum leap for all kinds of things now, and you're saying this is where it came from, right?
That is exactly where it came from. It's an energy state.
Okay, okay, got it.
Right. So there was another word you wanted me to define for you.
Well,
we're talking about
yeah,
quantum.
before we get to the other one, just as to make sure I understand what you're saying, that you're adding energy to an electron or a group of electrons that are orbiting around the nucleus of an atom. And you're at some point you can put in enough energy so it suddenly changes to the next preset place where it's supposed to orbit. And at some point also, I would imagine you could get that electron to leave that nucleus. Is that right?
Yeah, that's called stripping away of an electron, and that's how you form an ion. An ion is...
That's what was my question, yeah.
Okay. So that leads us to plasma. And
yeah, that was the other word, right.
Exactly. So plasma is an ionized gas. It is a gas that has had one or more of its electrons stripped away. And therefore, because of that, it now becomes conductive. it wants to attract electrons to itself, and that's what fills the void of space.
Where did those electrons go that got stripped off the atoms?
Well, they can be left free, or they can be stripped away and attached to another atom.
Okay, and does it matter which one of those happens to cause this conductive plasma that you're talking about?
No, I mean, you can use anything that has a smaller number of electrons and use it in what you would consider to be covalent bonding in chemistry and other processes like that, where you can enhance the number of electrons because you're using something that is naturally attracting electrons to it. So an electron being a negative charge, you would be using another atom of protons with a positive charge to attract those electrons. It's simple, basic electromagnetism.
Okay, so by the stripping process, you're creating positive ions, basically, right?
Yes, you're removing the negative charges and leaving behind the positive, which would be the protons.
Okay, and you get enough of this, and it makes plasma that we're starting to describe.
Which is an intermediate state. It is the fourth state of matter, meaning that it's not a gas, it's not a liquid, it's not a solid. It's an intermediate state, and it is considered to be transitional. But given the fact that most of the universe is filled with plasma, as opposed to the other four states of matter, because plasma overrides in quantity all of the matter, all of the gas, all of the liquids in the universe, it actually is the predominant state, the fourth state of matter.
So even though it's unstable and transitional, it's still the most prevalent.
Right, and that is because it acts as that conductive medium for the movement of particles through the universe, and it also acts as the source of magnetism. And when you have particles that are accelerated through a magnetic field, you are producing an electrical current.
Right. Okay. So this is kind of the area you're discussing is the interface between chemistry and physics.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
And chemistry is really nothing more than the bonding of other atoms and other molecules. Those bonds are dependent on their charge states, the number of protons and the number of electrons in a given atom or in a combination of atoms in a given molecule. So you're getting right down to the nub of the electromagnetic issue. Chemistry is nothing more than electromagnetism of materials.
Right, because when this various ionization and other kinds of reactions happen, then you get macro level changes that you can observe, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So this is all kind of a glimpse into how your investigation of the CERN activities was progressing, right? As you learn more about what they were doing with all of this.
Yes, and when I began to look at their goal, which they claimed they achieved in 2012, and that is the discovery of the Higgs boson.
Do you want to say what that was and what that is for people that don't know?
Yeah, in this modeling of the Big Bang inside the collider, trying to find the primordial materials, the prima materia, the first matter of the universe, often referred to as the singularity, the single particle. There's a timeline to the Big Bang as they put forth. Now, I don't adhere to this Big Bang, but this is how they describe it. When the first material exploded, it resulted in two types of materials. The first material was a combination of quarks and a binding material called gluons. The result of this condensate of quarks and gluons, this condensate that came together just after the first moment of the Big Bang, those are called strangelets. Now, the next material that was produced after this quark-gluon condensate were the hadrons. And this is what they consider to be the primary material giving rise to all other matter, that you had to have the hadron, and that's a family, that's a class of particles. You had to have the hadrons to then be able to produce at lower energy states all other matter in the universe. So those are the first two primordial steps in the Big Bang scenario: strangelets and then the hadrons. Now they do have strangelets being produced in the collider. They're actually manufacturing quarks and the binding material of gluon. It's a force, but it's also a material. It's matter. And you don't hear much about that. And the reason is because one of the three primary characteristics, and I'll just give you one, of strangelets is that it is the most explosive material in the known universe. And they're producing it in the ALICE detector of the CERN facility.
Are they just producing it in such small quantity that it's not a big problem?
Well, they are producing it, but the problem is, and there are many scientists who have, stated this before me and now echo what I'm saying to you right now, is that the second characteristics of strangelets is that they cannot be contained. They are so heavy and so dense, you cannot contain them, and thus they exit the detector. They leave the facility, and they continue traveling to the core of the planet. And this is what is known as the neutron star scenario, in which they arrive at the electromagnetically, let's just call it magnetically neutral core of our planet. And once there, the third characteristic comes into play of strangelets, and that is that being stable material, strangelets, and when I say stable, I mean magnetically stable, it actually attracts all other matter to themselves. So the surrounding core, all the way out to the mantle, to the crust of the planet, is considered unstable. Let's just call it oppositely charged material, which comprises our planet, is then electromagnetically attracted to the strangelets. This results in a collapsing of the planet, a condensing of all the matter of the planet. Sounds like a black hole scenario, but we'll talk about that in a second. It collapses the planet until it is so dense it becomes a neutron star. That's the third characteristics of strangelets.
So are they figuring that because the blowing up the atmosphere thing worked out okay, that this will probably be fine too?
So I don't want to scare people, but it's a matter of how much matter are they producing, how much in terms of the material produced both at CERN and also at Brookhaven Laboratory with the relativistic heavy ion collider. Both laboratories have been producing strangelets now for at least 4 years, certainly CERN in larger quantities. The question arises, how much of this material coming to rest in the core will then result in a problem for the planet?
Yeah.
That's the unanswered question.
So maybe they're hoping through observation to be able to tell when that happens just by watching it.
I suppose so. I would expect things like earthquakes to begin, giving us the telltale signs that something's awry.
That it might be too much or something.
Yeah. But God has a plan for this. Everything we talk about is under the umbrella of God's plan. He allows all of this to happen. Nothing happens that's outside of his plan and his omnipotence. And therefore, I take a humorous approach to this because it is pure folly on the part of Satan and his followers and his worshipers, because we know from reading the book of Revelation that God will eventually burn all of the elements. He will not destroy and judge by water. He will do it by fire. And he calls that burning of the elements. So long before we have a neutron star scenario, God will just take care of the planet itself.
Yeah, I don't think fear or worry really help anything. It's just kind of a strategic awareness of what's actually going on that maybe
Yes.
allows us to know what positive things to do.
So the question often will arise, why are you presenting the evidence of evil? What's your point? What's your goal? What drives you?
Right.
Those are questions to me.
Okay.
And the question is answered this way. I follow the leading of the Lord through prayer. I'm no one special. I'm just someone by the grace of God who's been saved. And he is having me present this evidence of evil for the purpose of saving souls. I'm not a preacher. I'm not a pastor. I'm none of that. I'm just a regular guy who's following what the Lord wants me to do with my life. And I truly, even the people we've been discussing that are worshiping Lucifer, I plead for their souls. I pray for their souls because they're humans just like you and I. And by the grace of God, I happen to be headed in the right direction with my face focused upon seeking God and the grace of God being extended to the salvation through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ and the imparting of the Holy Spirit upon me. I'm going the right direction. Unfortunately, these guys have been deceived. They're believing the age-old lies put forth by Satan, and I'm concerned about their souls along with everybody else's. Because you and I know full well the worship of Lucifer leads to Hades, and that's where these guys are headed unless they turn around. And on my radio broadcasts, I plead to these guys. You have a choice. You can go to the dark, you can go to the light. It's very simple. You go with Jesus Christ and God, or you go with Lucifer. Because where you're headed right now is you're headed to Hades, plain and simple.
How does this tie in to the bigger picture of the rise of what they call AI or artificial intelligence?
Absolutely. This is, again, information that is forbidden knowledge derived from the fallen angels. This is the counterfeiting of God's creation. It's the counterfeiting of our quantum computer between our ears. It is the counterfeiting through genetic manipulation, the changing of our human genome from the DNA right on up. This is changing our bodies and changing our minds and changing our brains. And this is all being done. Just as background, where do I get my information? I get it from their own published peer-reviewed papers. Mm-hmm. I read the laboratory studies. I read the hardcore science, and then I translate it down for my audiences because they need to know where the information is coming from and where science is heading. So it isn't just taking even something like Nature, where they're publishing these papers, just taking what is coming out of Nature magazine. You have to go to the source. You have to go to the hardcore published journals out of the laboratories and universities and look at what they're studying, what it is that they're promoting, the advancements they're making. So what is happening here is that this presentation of this evidence of evil is showing very clearly that AI has evil origins. The purpose is to replace the human mind. Let me give you another example from Gordy Rose, co-founder of D-Wave. Mm-hmm. He said that these machines will do everything, and he repeated it 3 times. They will do everything better than we can. Mm-hmm. So this is obvious that the agenda is to replace humanity.
Well, isn't it interesting that they're very fast developing not only these computer abilities, but synthetic bodies for them to go in that look just like people.
That is correct.
They've demonstrated some of them recently that are pretty amazing.
That is true. And it's not just Sophia and Michael, the 2 robots that they put out through, they're talking in terms of Hanson Robotics, which is where Sophia and Michael were built, and Sophia given citizenship in Saudi Arabia. These things, we're way beyond the nuts and bolts robots. What we're talking about is actual bioprinting of these bodies. This comes out of, among many others, one of the laboratories is the Institute for Human Longevity, which is Dr. Craig Venter in La Jolla, California, who was responsible for the first mapping of the human genome. In fact, his own human genome. And again, this came out of Berkeley, using a particle accelerator to do this. Okay. What we're talking about here is, by his own words, taking from the amino acids, the nucleic acids, the building blocks, the A, Q, C, D, and T, the building blocks of DNA and RNA, and creating designer DNA. And they digitize the DNA, they convert it to zeros and ones, and they transmit it through the cloud, and they use a sequencer at the opposite end. There's a sequencer and a reassembler at the other end of this transmission, and they reassemble the DNA, and they use a bioprinter, like a 3D printer, with this digitized code to reproduce the biological sample at a distance from the original. And this is all in the open. This is all public information.
Well, there's several levels of this research going on at once, because at the same time, biologically, they're working on all the possibilities of chimeras, right? Absolutely.
That is correct. They are actually taking samples of ancient DNA and sequencing that DNA into zeros and ones, into digitizing it. And their agenda is to resurrect the dead.
Or print synthetic beings from scratch, right?
Right. So you use the old DNA as your blueprint, as your digital coding. I've written several articles called In Silico DNA. That's in the computer DNA. And designing it and growing it with bioprinting.
Right.
So this isn't, science fiction and, deep underground military bases and humanoids and stasis and all that. You don't need all that. You don't need to go to the science fiction.
It's all about synthetic creation, basically, right?
It is. This is the replacing of the counterfeiting of God's creation. Satan hates God's creation. He wants to eliminate it and produce his own race of beings. You go to somebody as, well, I won't even use the word, but Lady Gaga, who on the Jay Leno Tonight Show years ago said famously, the birthing of a new race. I mean, it's right in our face. Their agenda is to birth a new race.
Yeah, it's the deeper levels of what people see as genetic engineering and the GMOs and geoengineering. I mean, it's total engineering of everything.
Yes, it is. And when you have the lenses provided by the Holy Spirit, you have the discernment to be able to do the 180 process and look at the evidence. When I look at their scientific papers, I do the 180, just like we were talking about. And you turn it around, and you can see the nefarious side of what they're experimenting with, what they are trying to accomplish. So you were talking about AI. I've done quite a bit of research into the programming of AI. There's things called the Boltzmann machine, recursive neural network, deep neural network, deep machine learning. This goes into binary and ternary mathematics and balanced ternary. This goes into the geometry of the information flow within the quantum brain, which has to do with the arrangement of qubits into tetrahedrons that result in the geometry of the quantum computer. I mean, it gets very complex. I'm just giving you, bullet points here.
Yeah.
But I have spent a lot of time in my Entangled magazine presenting the scientific evidence of what is going on with AI from a software and a quantum mechanics basis. So when we talk about things like CERN and quantum mechanics or particle physics, when we talk about quantum computers like we do with D-Wave, and then we start talking about DNA, all three of these are absolutely integrated together, and they all result in artificial intelligence.
So if they're designing artificial intelligence to go beyond, way beyond what humans are capable of, then why would they want to design something that's almost guaranteed to get out of their control because of that?
Yes, they don't believe that it will ever be out of their control. Again, the mindset, as you described, the dopamine, the endorphin release, the getting drunk on what they're doing, that obviously clouds your judgment. I mean, define what drunk is. So
it kind of makes you oblivious of what should be super obvious, right?
It is. And they truly believe that this is benevolent. They truly believe this is the ascension of humanity into a higher life form that we were predestined to, quote, evolve into.
So they think these new beings are going to be really friendly when they create them?
Well, they believe that they will be those new beings, leaving everybody else behind. They believe in this Ray Kurzweil from Google, the head of engineering at Google, Ray Kurzweil, he pushes this transhumanism agenda hard. Yeah. And it is not just the old standby scenario of uploading your consciousness into a computer. No, it's way beyond that. This is uploading your memories and your consciousness, and they don't like talking about the soul because that might lead to talking about God. Right. But they believe they can upload the essence of what a person is into an artificial body, into an artificial life form.
But is that life form going to be not subject to degeneration over time?
They don't believe so. They believe that they can create the materials that result in longevity and perhaps immortality because they can replace the parts that wear out. And they don't necessarily understand they're not building something that has a liver and a heart and kidneys.
Right.
Okay.
And it's also going to be able to build its own replacement parts,
certainly.
Or one of them will anyway. Yeah.
Sure. If you can use a bioprinter to create the parts and assemble into a body, into a life form, then you can obviously have replacement parts for as long as you need them.
Okay. So they think they can really take the essence of their being, their consciousness or their spirit or whatever you want to call it, and reduce it to a physical and electronic basis, and thereby kind of capture it and make it immortal.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay.
And they tell us that.
Right.
They tell us that right to our face. Now, let's go back to Gordy Rose. I'm only using him as an example because he's so out in the public all the time, making his proclamations. So, okay. D-Wave quantum computing, accessing parallel dimensions. Then he co-founds and steps over from D-Wave to a company in British Columbia called Kindred. Kindred builds AI robots. Now he has just opened an offshoot from Kindred, and we can use the name, Kindred Spirits.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay? It's just in our faces. They don't care.
Yeah.
So he has a spin-off company that's just been announced called Sanctuary. And the purpose of Sanctuary is to build the humanoid body that Kindred's AI system will inhabit. I don't have to make this up. All I have to do is report it.
So Kindred is like the idea is that here are your long-lost synthetic brothers and sisters.
That is correct. And I referred to Gordy Rose's personal website, but in a statement he made to Tech Vancouver, to an audience of people he was trying to recruit into Kindred, into the AI company, software engineers, roboticists, he was trying to recruit people in. And this is on YouTube. You can see Gordy Rose. He's doing the whole thing. He is talking about and referring to and promoting the great old ones returning to this earth as promulgated by H.P. Lovecraft, a turn-of-the-century occultic author. And Gordy Rose promotes his books even on his own website. And he's talking about the return of the great old ones who have no thought for humanity. They don't hate humanity. They don't like humanity. He related their reference of humanity by the great old ones that he believes are returning. He outwardly stated he believes they're returning. They look at humanity the way we look at ants.
So does he think that these returning great ones are going to cooperate with his synthetic person development?
Well, he believes
it's going to be a great relationship.
He believes they're already in communication with the great old ones. We would call them the fallen angels.
So he figures that they're getting along really well, I guess.
Well, apparently they are, because the information that D-Wave has, that CERN has, that Dr. Craig Venter, others that are doing DNA research, quantum computing, particle physics research, the information that results in the technologies that we see, that is all information derived from the other side. Because if you look at their belief system, if you look at Shiva, if you look at the website of Gordy Rose and all of the occultic things that he promotes on his website, if you look at Dr. Craig Ventner talking about creating a new human race, a new life form through bioprinting, you can see that all of their origins are from the same place. They're all deriving their information through this communications with the other side, exactly as the Nazis did, exactly as the Egyptians and the Sumerians did, the Babylonians did. When the Tower of Babel was built, that was all information from Satan himself.
Well, so it's really important for the continuity that the U.S. government after World War II imported all the Nazis that were in the scientific world over there, right, at the end of the war.
Yeah, we had something like 2,000 Nazi scientists, including the infamous Dr. Werner von Braun, that were brought over through Operation Paperclip and made U.S. citizens, and then we founded NASA.
Yeah, exactly. Just for the benefit of humanity, of course.
Yeah, and we can talk about Jack Parsons and his involvement in the occult, and the Jack Parsons Laboratory, which is now the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Okay, that's all tied in with NASA. Why is a guy like Jack Parsons communicating with the dead? Well, he got information as to how to develop rocketry, as did Werner von Braun.
Right. Well, fortunately, everybody's going to be okay because they'll all be rich via cryptocurrency now, right?
Exactly.
Have things get better.
This is a great topic to talk about, because if you go back just a year ago, even AI was not something that was really out there that people were talking about, unless you were kind of a geek like me and you were studying AI. Yeah. All of a sudden, AI is everywhere. Now we have this parabolic explosion, as I call it, of cryptocurrencies. And more specifically,
I want to make it clear that we're not just jumping to another random topic. This is connected.
This is all connected. Cryptocurrencies have as its structure, as its architecture, its backbone, what is known as the blockchain system. The blockchain system is doing what I call raising the IQ of AI. Okay?
So, yeah, we need to explain what you mean by that, for sure.
So there's your tie back to AI and quantum computing. The blockchain system, very superficially here, it is comprised of a block is a transaction. It's a contract. And it results from the decrypting of a code. A specific code is given, and the job of the person who is mining is finding the answer to that code. They're decoding the code, and that is what is called proof of work. Once you achieve the decoding of this information, you have done that through using a hardware and software system that performs work, and then you are awarded a cryptocurrency for that work. So proof of work results in a cryptocurrency being awarded to you. That transaction results in a record. It is a transaction that is recorded as a block, and it is called an open ledger system. Every time one of these transactions occurs, another block is added to the chain. And this begins to proliferate at an exponential rate. The more blocks, the more transactions that take place, and exponentially the blockchain proliferates.
Okay, so just to stop you for a second, on the idea of proof of work, this is connected with the ads you see. Don't worry, make money by mining Bitcoins or some other cryptocurrency. And what that really means, although it's getting more and more difficult and requiring more computing power to do it as more people get into it, but the basic idea is that if you have enough computing power in your computer setup at home or where you work, that you can program it to solve these very complex mathematical problems, which is what they consider mining the coins. Mm-hmm. And then they award you a certain credit for that. And when you're done solving that problem, is that what you're calling one block?
Yes, once you solve the problem, that is recorded as a block in an open ledger, and then you are given a coin, a specific cryptocurrency coin, because you performed that work, which was decoding a piece of information.
Okay, and the open ledger means anybody can go and look at it, right?
Theoretically.
Yeah, theoretically, if they can get to it. And then you have, on that same open ledger, is recorded one credit of whatever value it is currently to you, whatever name you want to use to own it. And then you keep doing that, and theoretically it provides an income just like mining some real metal in the ground. And that's the basis of the industry of cryptocurrency.
And then you move into the buying and selling of those coins, and those are likewise recorded in the blockchain. Okay. So what we're experiencing here is building what I consider to be the mark of the beast system, and we are building it ourselves. And the reason that we're building it is because of greed. And so those that have designed the system and put it in place know that by appealing to the base nature of humans, which along with many others is greed, that they can get humans to build their own prison. Because the blockchain does not apply just to cryptocurrencies. It applies to all facets of life. Legal contracts are already within the blockchain environment. The contracts are being recorded. Somebody like Julian Assange from WikiLeaks openly stated that early on, before this parabolic explosion of cryptocurrencies, early on they took all of their evidence and embedded it in the blockchain system for security purposes, okay? Because they knew that if somebody tried to tamper with it, it would be recorded as a block, that tampering.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So this is going to spread into all facets of life. What does this mean to you and me? It means that everything will be attached to the blockchain system. And at some point, if we focus on just the cryptocurrencies, let's say, for example, you participated in the system and you amassed $1 million wealth in cryptocurrencies, Bitcoins or Ethereum or any of the others.
Yeah.
And one day, someone in control approaches you and says, would you like to continue having access to your wealth, to your $1 million? Yes, I would. Well, then you are going to need to accept this mark in order to gain access to it. Right. And we know from Scripture that if you do not take the mark, then you will not be able to buy or sell. I rest my case.
Yeah, so in other words, getting everybody totally dependent on the blockchain, which is being promoted as the path to freedom in a lot of different ways right now, and privacy and being away from the authority controls and stuff like that, that is actually going to turn out to be the opposite, is what you're saying.
That is absolutely correct. This is not freeing anybody. This is not sidestepping taxation. This is not doing away with money laundering. All of these discussions have circulated around this whole blockchain system. Everyone is focused on the currencies. They're not paying attention to the architecture that they're building, the prison system and this isn't just, me being sensational here. This is looking at from the quantum computing origins of blockchain, specifically the cryptology that is embedded and actually allows the blockchain system to function. That cryptology has its origin back to D-Wave. The first prototypes were built with the goal in mind of taking what is known as Shor's algorithm and finding all of the prime factors in his 2048 algorithm and then his follow-on, which was the 4096 algorithm, and breaking that, because Peter Shor himself said when he created these algorithms, which are the basis for the predominant system of encrypting information and communications, which is known as the RSA, who were the three scientists that developed this, the three mathematicians that developed this encoding system, that the 2048 and 4096 algorithms from Peter Shor formed the basis for this RSA encryption system. That it would take, Peter Shor said it would take a quantum computer to identify all the prime factors and thus break what is known as a public key encryption system to encrypt and decode at the other end using a public key. Now, understanding that that was the basis for the testing and the provability of the quantum computers actually functioning as computers, by breaking these two codes, this is why the NSA supported, why DARPA supported the foundation of the building by D-Wave of quantum computers. And NSA and Google and Amazon and Facebook and Lockheed Martin, Lockheed USC, Volkswagen, Toyota, Temporal Defense Systems, all of these organizations own D-Wave, and now China all own D-Wave computers at the 2000Q model level. And the 4096, the 4000Q, will come out in just a few months. The point here is the quantum computers of D-Wave created the encryption system for blockchain to function, and thus spawned the cryptocurrency that everybody is agaga about and don't understand that they're building the mark of the beast system by participating in the Bitcoin and others like Ethereum system.
Okay, so in other words, because did you ever read Lord of the Rings, that trilogy by Tolkien?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
Because the reason I ask you is it's a really neat story, and it sounds like this is like the ring that was. There was this guy named Sauron who was in charge of everything. He was the Dark Lord, and he made a magic ring, and there were a whole bunch of other rings that were given to some of the high people in different races of people, and they got all excited about it, and it gave them powers, but they didn't realize they were all under control of the one ring from which they all came. And it's similar to what I think you're describing, that because the people in possession of the D-Wave computer technology are the ones that, if I understand you right, invented the whole foundation of blockchain and the way it works, that therefore it guarantees, because of its origin, what its final result will be, which is not freedom, but the opposite.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I know I tend to go on kind of long in my statements, but you sure summed that up beautifully.
I thought yours was really good, and I just wanted to make sure I understood it correctly. That because these lesser rings, which are the blockchain applications, are all originating from the one ring, which is the D-Wave computer, that they have nowhere else to end up other than enslavement and control.
That is true. And you cannot break this blockchain system unless you have a D-Wave quantum computing system. There are other quantum computers that are at the experimental and prototype level. There's nothing that even comes close to what D-Wave is doing. And the essence of it is quantum entanglement. And if you try to hack into a quantum entangled system, which is what the blockchain is, it is a quantum entangled system. Mm-hmm. If you try to hack it, even using another identical quantum computer from D-Wave, the system senses the intrusion and the quantum entanglement state collapses. It's called superposition. It collapses. So it is virtually unhackable.
That's why people like it so much, right?
That's why they like it so much. But if you do the 180 as you and I do, if you turn it around, you realize that it's a prison.
Right. It's a completely secure. Well, prisons are pretty secure. It's just that they're under control of the people that can do whatever they want to you.
Right. And therefore, if all facets of life are connected to the blockchain and controlled by the blockchain, and those that control the blockchain as the keepers of the prison, then unless you want to be connected to that by taking the mark of the beast, you will be locked out of that. You'll be outside the prison walls. Now, here's the good news.
Unable to get any materials for anything, right, or do anything.
Well, I take the example of the Exodus. Did God provide to those people manna from heaven and water from the rock?
So don't be afraid of being outside the blockchain, is what you're saying, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As long as you are found in the book of life, as long as you are one of God's people, God will take care of us. In fact, what is already taking place, because the book of Daniel has been unsealed, and it's not a book, it's the damming up of the living waters. It's the damming up of the information flow that God commanded Daniel to seal up the book until the latter days. It is actually to seal up the information until the latter days. And what God is doing right now with his people is he is transforming and augmenting through the Holy Spirit our minds and our bodies to counter what is going on by Satan through this evidence of evil that I present.
Well, right, because if like you said, everything is going to be put into the blockchain, then we can't be like half asleep to stay out of it. We're going to have to be creative.
Absolutely, we have to be creative, and we have to be in prayer, because God will lead us and will provide to us, just like he provides for the sparrow. He provides for his people. He's not going to let us starve to death. He's not going to let us go thirsty and hungry. The key is, are you facing him? Are you seeking his face? Are you staying on the narrow path? Are you staying in prayerful contact and communication with Jesus Christ, our intercessor, on a daily basis? That's where provision comes from.
Do you think that also on the physical level that a whole almost parallel human-friendly support system and world will turn up here to help the people that don't want to be inside that control system?
Yes. I believe so. Because as you and I talked about before coming on the air earlier today, through the Holy Spirit, through our minds, through this connectedness that we talked about at the beginning of the show, the connectedness with everything, we can, through prayer, through faith and prayer, bring the provisions from the universe, if you will, if you want to go to that scale. Yeah. You can bring those provisions to yourself through the Holy Spirit.
Well, right. In other words, new ideas, inventiveness, creativeness, things that you need to solve problems, that doesn't have to come from the dark side.
That is absolutely correct.
The people that are really, excited about the fact of all the power that they get from willing to give in to pain and death and all this bad stuff, that they're only looking at the smaller, fake, negative version of the real creativity. So if you're unconscious and that's all you see, it can look really hopeless. But if you get connected to the rest of the story, then like you say, you don't really have to worry about that.
No, that's why I don't have any fear about what's going on, even though I examine this stuff in detail. And it can be depressing to look at what's going on and think, wow, we as humans are just, we're pawns. It's out of control. There's nothing we can do about it. We're just one person.
Exactly what they want us to think of ourselves as. Yeah.
That's right. But the good news is, and you look at it in Scripture, again, I'm going to back to what I opened the show with. John 14:12, verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall he do, because I go to my Father. And whosoever ye shall ask in my name, whatsoever ye shall ask in my name, that will I do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If ye shall ask anything in my name, I will do it. That's the answer to the whole problem that we're facing right now. If we stop for a moment and look at the word works, you can think of those as miracles. If Jesus raised the dead, if he fed the multitude with the fish, if he broke the bread, if he changed the water into wine, okay, that's provision right there. I rest my case again.
Yeah, we have potential that we've kind of forgotten about.
We sure have.
Yeah, the other thing is that it seems to me that the common element in the mentality of the whole so-called negative power structure and the people that are following it, both leaders and followers, the common element appears to be fear. And that out of that comes all of the other negative emotions and actions and thoughts and everything else. And it turns out that we were convinced that fear is necessary and part of our nature, but really it's foreign and we don't need it for anything.
No, we don't. We are to be filled with joy. And this is the simple teaching of Jesus himself.
Right. Yeah, that probably contains everything else you need. So I guess as a bottom line, tying all these things together, it's definitely an important insight into the blockchain because everybody is going to be enticed to join it right now. And that may not be, the brilliant idea that it looks like. And as far as what all of it's teaching is that you don't really need fancy technology to do what you need to do.
I would agree with that, and wholeheartedly I agree with it, because one of the interesting things that I've come up with here is that the book of Daniel, we go back to that scenario for a moment, because you have to look at the origins. Nebuchadnezzar and his dream. Daniel was commanded by the king, requested, if you will, by the king to tell the king what was his dream. And he didn't have any foreknowledge. No one had told. The king had never told anyone what his dream consisted of. Mm-hmm. And of course, Daniel was able to tell him his dream. Then he asked him to interpret it. Daniel used geomancy. Daniel was a highly educated, highly skilled individual who practiced the art, the skill, the craft of geomancy. And again, this is the divination of random marks in the soil or sticks and stones that are cast onto the soil. Mm-hmm. This was a common practice. Now, this doesn't mean that God was condoning that practice, because it was divination, which is prohibited in Scripture. But he allowed Daniel to use that to understand the dream and then to interpret it for Nebuchadnezzar. And immediately upon completion of that interpretation, God told Daniel to seal up the book until the latter days. Now, what I'm presenting to you is the evidence that the book of Daniel, which is the flow of hidden information, mm-hmm. has been revealed to God's people. And what God is saying is that the origin of quantum computing, the origin of transistor-based computing, the origins of all of our technology go back to the dark arts. And in specifics, I'm talking about binary coming from geomancy. And this goes into Cantor set mathematics all the way on out to today's computer programming. Mm-hmm. And again, there's lots of articles in Entangled Magazine about this, but we actually produced, my fiance, Kathleen Urquhart, and myself, we researched together all the time on these things. We showed ancient paintings of Jesus Christ in the temple when he was presented the prostitute who was about to be stoned to death by the crowd with the Sadducees and Pharisees in attendance, and they were goading the Pharisees and Sadducees, goading judgment being passed by Jesus. And Jesus actually, and most people don't know this, but it's recorded in the ancient paintings, Jesus used geomancy in the soil to communicate in the secret language that only the skilled and schooled Pharisees and Sadducees would have any knowledge of, because the crowd didn't. And he used this encrypted communication system to communicate to the Pharisees who he was, that he was the Son of God. Because how could a lowly carpenter have such knowledge when only the elite were privy to those schools of geomancy? Mm-hmm. And by doing this, he allowed them the opportunity to save face and to quietly leave the crowd. Okay? And they were stunned that he was communicating to them in their own language. And they did quietly leave, only to have him, of course, crucified because of what he was doing. They said he was practicing the dark arts. He claims to be the Son of God. It's blasphemy for what he does.
Right. It's kind of like now, I mean, anything that you do positively, it can be twisted and used as evidence against you, just made to look that way.
Well, I'm going to be very personal here for a moment, if I may.
Sure.
My exposing of Gordy Rose of late, and in fact, this presentation earlier this year that is on YouTube, Gordy Rose is talking to these scientists that he's trying to recruit at Tech Vancouver, the event. Mm-hmm. And he starts his PowerPoint presentation by showing my picture to the crowd. And you can see it in the video. And he's he's chastising me for relating the Mandela effect to what is going on with the quantum computers. And then later on, he gets into talking about H.P. Lovecraft and the return of the great old ones. Mm-hmm. So it's all in that same conversation. And now that I am presenting, and not just yesterday, but quite a few times before, showing his occult belief system, but now that I have really delved into his personal website, which is very hard to find, and I will continue that on the Kev Baker Show on Wednesday and my own show on Friday, mm-hmm. I'm predicting as a result that they are going to attack me directly in terms of my character and my belief system and try to tear me down in reaction to not my attacking Gordy Rose, but his belief system, again, for the purpose of trying to turn him to Jesus Christ for his salvation.
Right. Yeah, pretty interesting adventure right now. So how do they, I mean, how much of a threat to their whole project do they think that you are at this point?
I'm not a threat. They're far enough along in their agenda that they are being so open about their belief system and so open about their agenda. They are not trying to hide anything. They really aren't. The blockchain is hidden right now because they want people to continue building out the system. Mm-hmm. But virtually everything else, when they talk about DNA and Dr. Craig Ventnor talking about creating a new human race, that's out in the open. When Ray Kurzweil from Google talks about uploading your consciousness into a computer, that's out in the open. Right. When Gordy Rose talks about the return of the old ones and the creation of AI systems that can do everything better than we can, And now with Sanctuary creating humanoid bodies to inhabit, to be indwelt by AI, which in my viewpoint as a Christian, this is nothing more than a vessel for demonic spirits to inhabit.
Yeah, something has to inhabit them or they wouldn't be directed.
And that's what AI is. AI is already a system of possession.
Because just the mechanical part of AI can't really decide what to do other than what it's programmed to do. But if you have it connected to some form of consciousness, that's different.
That is correct. And the consciousness of AI has many, many, many levels. It's what they call artificial general intelligence, but it goes beyond AGI. It goes to a higher level of AI. But all of the stratifications of AI, from the simplest in terms of you want to talk about autonomous vehicle operations and things like that, or robotic arms that are utilized in a order fulfillment center like Kindred's robots are in the Gap fulfillment center right now.
Okay.
Those are very low level. But every level of artificial intelligence has some degree of spiritual possession. It absolutely has to, because you have to look at the origins of its programming. The origins of the programming are in geomancy. Geomancy produced the binary system, which we now know as computer programming. And it has moved from binary into ternary, which is -1, 0, and 1. That's balanced ternary, and another form which is 0, 1, and 2. Those are the highest levels of programming language for the highest levels of AI. It all has its origins in communicating through geomancy with fallen angels. Okay?
Okay, I can see that. So you can see this turning into a world where all of the things that the humans do now are done by the AI possessed beings that are the synthetic people that can do everything better and faster and keep everybody else in control. And the vision would be having humanity, the ones that are still alive, as kind of a prisoner race, right? That don't do anything, but they're allowed to stay alive and they're given a stipend to live on, provided that they accept all the conditions.
That is correct, and we all know that they're trying to push that whole thing of a what do they call the universal the income, the universal income.
Yeah, exactly right. I think it's come up in Scandinavia recently, and it was just barely voted down, but they're going to keep bringing it up until it passes, and it's going to be pushed just like AI is, and like all this technology is, that it's going to make life wonderful because you don't have to deal with the nasty requirement to work anymore.
Let's take that and layer it into the blockchain again. What the blockchain represents is the hive mentality. If you want to go to Star Trek and talk about the Borg, that's fine. The hive mentality, once you take the mark of the beast, you will lose all self-awareness, all independent thought. You will then be plugged into the hive mentality, and you will have this collective brain that you are connected to. Now, let me back that up with some hard science. Coming out of Purdue University in 2006, their white paper put together the structure for what is known as the Sentient World Simulation, SWS. It went live through D-Wave's quantum computers in 2007. The Sentient World Simulation represents every single person on the planet as a node and is given an avatar. This is in the Purdue University's own paper. Look up Sentient World Simulation. It's right there. You can read all of this. This is what all of the world's intelligence agencies do their data mining through. This is primarily driven by a software program from Palantir Corporation. Palantir is a third-party vendor to D-Wave for the software program and utilization of quantum computing for the SWS. Last year, Donald Trump went to Saudi Arabia and participated in the opening ceremonies of their terrorist threat center in Saudi Arabia, in which the Palantir trademark was utilized in a staged photographic moment, photo op, in which Donald Trump was standing there with the other dignitaries from Saudi Arabia with his hands on a crystal ball, which is the trademark of Palantir Software Corporation.
Yeah, I think I remember that picture, actually.
This is the sentient world simulation. Mm-hmm. What they are creating is a new virtual reality, which is more specifically called a new augmented reality. The Internet of Things, through all of its inputs, all of its detectors, all of its sensors, gathers information real time and is pumped into this Palantir system that all the intelligence agencies utilize and corporations, have access to for the purpose of monitoring everything that is going on the planet. Mm-hmm. This is what blockchain is a part of, is the sentient world simulation. And it is increasing what is known in programming as the granularity of data. This is increasing the density of data in the system, in the simulation. It will reach a point at which the density or the granularity of data will reach a point where it spontaneously converts data into matter. We already have holograms that produce touchable, tangible, three-dimensional, solid matter holographic images that you can interact with. Mm-hmm. And in AI, they call it haptic, the haptic, which is touch and feel. So all of this is part of the simulation, which is what you will be plugged into if you take the mark of the beast. This is the hive system, as many people want to call it, but I try to be more specific with that.
This is another level of the vision of Agenda 21 as well, right?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because that was inventory and control of everything on the planet.
That is right. That is right. Inventory and control. So if you want a specific example, why would the banks want to be tied into this SWS? Well, if you're trading in currencies, or if you are a commodity trader in the stock market, in the commodities markets, or if you are a stock trader, if you knew in the butterfly effect scenario, something that happened on the other side of the planet was going to affect something on this side of the planet that you're invested in or you're thinking about investing in, you would want that information as quickly as possible to have a leveraged position, to have not leverage, but to have a position of advantage over other investors. Mm-hmm. So they pay dearly for access to Palantir and the SWS.
Boy, pretty interesting. So even though it looks like life systems based on nature rather than synthetic virtual reality are being eliminated systematically by the march toward this virtual reality, we should not think that we're not going to be able to do that, because all of this virtual reality synthetic stuff that goes toward control, inventory and control and extermination and all that, it actually comes from a very low level of power because it's all from the negative side. It's not as impressive as it wants us to think it is.
You mentioned The Lord of the Rings. Now, I've not read the books, but my fiancée Kathleen, she had, and she pointed out that Gollum, the character who got the ring and then fell into, I guess it's a lake of molten lava.
Well, at the very end, he inadvertently saves the world, even though he's a bad guy, because he's used in the larger plan of things to where at the last minute, the guy who's trying to give up the ring and throw it into the lava to melt it and bring down the whole negative power structure can't do it. And his ego takes over, and he's going to make himself the ruler of everything. And this bad guy, Gollum, that's been following him, jumps on him to get the ring for himself, gets it away from him, and in the process falls into the lava that the ring needed to go into, and that makes it turn out okay. Not that I want to spoil the ending. But
I know the books have been out for a long time. It's not really a spoiler alert, but she said to me that Satan is nothing different, does not look anything different than Gollum, that he's just this little shriveled up little creature, and that's what we as God's people will find about Satan, is that he really is insignificant compared to God. Now, let me give you a mathematical representation. We did some webinars, and they're on my website at anthonypatch.com. And the last webinar we did was called The Fullness of the Gentiles. Mm-hmm. And we laid out, and I'm going to be very brief here, we laid out mathematically and geometrically something that's fascinating. God revealed to us that Satan makes 6 moves. And you have to see the graphics and the things that we presented, but just picture Satan trying to make 6 moves. God is making 28 moves to every 6 of Satan's. And again, we break it all down, but just to take that as a representation of how insignificant Satan is in the greater scheme, the greater plan of God. Because Satan's nothing more than a tool of God's.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
So
people think there's this big fight with an uncertain outcome between, the bad guy and the good guy, and we don't even know what's going to happen, and maybe everything will be lost. But it's not really like that.
Not at all. He really doesn't have any power, and the only thing that he has is what's been given to him and approved by God himself.
Or it wouldn't have happened. That's right.
Correct. So he's a tool of judgment. And, going back to all these scientists and everybody that are scrambling to do all these things, they really believe, and so does Satan, that by bringing all this technology to bear, that somehow they can sidestep God's judgment, because he knows he has but a short time. But in his hubris, understanding he's a father of lies, he has the type of hubris we as humans cannot even imagine the depth and scope of it. But he actually is so deceived in his own mind that he believes he can sidestep judgment, that he can actually kill God. Right. I mean, that's the essence of what we're talking about here.
It's not really a great plan.
No, it's not. And like Gollum, we know where he ends up.
Yeah, it's a long learning process, but as soon as people are willing to, they can learn faster and shake themselves out of the hypnotism, I think. One of the things I want to do, and we're a little over time, but what I want to leave people with is how they can continue this with you, and anybody that wants to go to your website, get your books, anything like that, to stay in touch with the developing, ongoing work that you're doing.
Yeah, if you go to anthonypatch.com, you'll see my magazines and my webinars and that sort of thing. But one thing I did in December was to take 20 of my articles from 2017 and put them together in a free copy, a free issue of the magazine, so that you can get a sense of what it is that I cover in the magazine itself. And it's pretty deep stuff in terms of the science that I get into, which is quantum computing. It's not heavy on math. You don't have to worry about that. But I really try to translate the arcane complexities of DNA, quantum mechanics, quantum computing, AI, and the blockchain in my magazine. And, it's there because I am trying to present the evidence to people, again, for the salvation of souls, if not their own, because many people are already saved that read my magazine, but something that you can present to someone that you are trying to save, again, as evidence.
Okay, so that would be a good, even beginning introduction for people that don't know about your work yet, to go there, right? Yeah. And is the site anthonypatch.com? Is that the one that you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, and what about getting the books if they want to do that?
Yeah, the books are available on the website there too. Two of them are novels. The other is a nonfiction, Revising Reality.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope we can do some more stuff together and kind of support the general attempt to help people wake up and get the tools that they need that don't come from a negative source. And we'll have to see where it goes. It'll be an interesting adventure.
Yeah, I'd love to continue our conversations. And I want to do a shout out to Doug Diamond, who's handling the tech side of the show tonight, because I just brought him on board as my webmaster. And he will also be helping me to continue publishing my magazine, Entangled Magazine. So big shout out to Doug, who's helping us tonight.
Yeah, wonderful. And for Lost Arts Radio, too, it wouldn't be happening without Doug's work. And anybody that wants to see more about what he's doing outside of the show, diamonddiscaudio.com is the place to go for information on that. So anyway, hold on and we'll say goodbye after the break here, Anthony, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely. God bless you all.
Bless you. Okay, everybody, there goes Anthony Patch. Lots of incredible information from him. I really have been wanting to get him on for a long time. Doug's been mentioning it, and somehow we've never gotten around to it, and it finally got to start happening. So I think that's great. And I've been suspicious, actually, of the blockchain technology for many years, but I didn't know Anthony had knowledge in that area and never really heard its problems explained clearly before his explanation tonight, so I really appreciate that. Remember, you can follow Anthony's work at anthonypatch.com, and also I wanted to say thank you before we wrap up to all the people who have signed up for the new Saturday show and the new format at lostartsradio.com/club. And I apologize also to those of you who have been trying to sign up over the last few days and had trouble with the links at that page. As of last night, I think they're fixed, and we've got people coming in again that seem to be having no trouble. So try it out, lostartsradio.com/club. That'll get you into the new video format for the Saturday show, when we're going to be able to start getting into some more sensitive material with a little bit more privacy because of the club format. And you'll see it has a lot of advantages, so hope you can have time to get in during the week and get signed up so that you'll be ready for next Saturday's show. The whole new Saturday format has started in January. That's the very first use of the new fancy video platform that we just got, so I hope you can be there with us. And just go to lostartsradio.com/club and you read the details, and you'll see all about why we're doing it this way, the advantages of it, etc. And it's going to be a lot of information this year, starting now, that you can use on this site, and we'll be able to talk more about your personal situations as well. We're getting a lot of questions and comments coming in during the week that will make some of the subject matter for the first part of that show where I talk before we start taking some calls. And the calls also have a totally different format. We're just trying to get used to that now. And you can actually show up on chat all during the show. It's run basically, the platform's like a private special webinar every week, and you'll get your own personal entry credentials once you're signed up before each show. And if you miss the show, or you're in a time zone in the world where you can't conveniently show up during the live time, it's okay, because as soon as you're signed up, you'll get all the archives. It didn't work on the very first show because we had a lot of technical stuff to work out, but it should be working fine at this point. And you'll have access to that whether or not you get to show up at the live time. So if you're in Europe or somewhere where it's the middle of the night when we're broadcasting here, don't worry, because you'll still have access. And if you want to get your questions and comments and subjects addressed during that Saturday live discussion show, and you're not in the right time zone, just send them as an email to me at richard@lostartsradio.com, and I will read all of them, respond as time allows, and I will use them for discussion on the club show on Saturday nights, which you'll then get access to as a member. So in the meantime, we're starting to put a series of YouTube videos out that are about short bits of different subjects that people are asking about. I'm going to try to make those as valuable and as informative as I possibly can. So the first 4 of them I think are already posted, and we'll do more frequently now. I hope to get several per week out, so stay in touch with those. And remember that the archives for the old format show are still all available on lostartsradio.com and blogtalkradio.com/lostartsradio. So you can take a look at those during the week. The forum is still operating on lostartsradio.com. The Facebook group is up for Lost Arts Radio. Plenty of opportunity to communicate during the week. And then I will meet you here next Saturday, as long as you're signed up in time, lostartsradio.com/club. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you on Saturday.
As of January 2018, the Saturday live call-in show is now an interactive video platform called the Planetary Healing Club. The cost is just a $10 minimum monthly donation, automatically billed through your PayPal account. Sign up at lostartsradio.com/club. The Planetary Healing Club is every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. You get your link to participate in the show upon signing up as a member. Those shows are also archived as well for club members. Listen to our new shows with guests every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. All Sunday shows with guests have archives freely available on our website at lostartsradio.com. You can also find them at blogtalkradio.com/lostartsradio, as well as our YouTube channel, youtube.com/C/lostartsradio. Mixcloud at mixcloud.com/lostartsradio. And finally, look us up under the podcast directory on iTunes. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/lostartsradio or on Twitter at Lost Arts Radio. Be sure to join the free Lost Arts Radio Facebook group as well. Just search for Lost Arts Radio Group within Facebook. You can also join our forum on our website if you want to interact with other listeners. We also have links to all of the great independent musicians whose music we feature each week on Lost Arts Radio. When you do your Amazon shopping, please use Amazon's Smile program at smile.amazon.com. And when you choose Lost Arts Research Institute in Sedona, Arizona as your charity, Amazon will donate 0.5% of whatever your order total is to Lost Arts Research Institute to help fund the building of the school and keep our radio show on the air. Please visit lostartsresearchinstitute.org for more information on the school we want to build. Be sure to sign up for our free weekly newsletter on our site under the Radio Show tab or right from the button on our Facebook page. Contact Richard at richard@lostartsradio.com or myself, Doug Diamond, at doug@lostartsradio.com. Thanks again for listening to Lost Arts Radio, and we'll see you again next week.
Free falling on now, where do I begin? Free falling till the birds forget to sing. But I found you in a crowd of